This week we explored the world of birds, and I'm excited to be able to share with you in this video about my method of gathering resources and all of the resources that we used, and then how we spent our week together learning about birds. I'm Julia, welcome to my channel, Freestyling It. The inspiration came from the Parent-Teacher Guide of God's World News. I am always looking ahead about 2 weeks in God's World News so that I can be gathering resources, ordering books from the library, sometimes purchasing books online if there are activities associated with that study. I will be planning those out in advance, etc., so that when the week comes around, I am prepared. I have our resources mostly settled, although there's always room for going with the flow and embarking on the journey in such a way as allowing the conversation and the interest to lead our discovery. So for this week, I had done quite a bit of research. I had ordered a whole stack of books from the library. One book in particular that the library did not have, and I just thought, oh, that would fit in so perfectly with our theme. So I did end up purchasing a book, which I don't normally do, and I organized and prepared for our bird study. Now, not every week is as in-depth. In fact, this week was so in-depth that we kind of took a break the next week, which is the week that I'm in right now. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't done any school at all. It just means that I haven't done another unit study within this week. I have been continuing to read aloud each morning to the kids during our breakfast time, and we've been doing some math activities this week as well, and various other book reading, but nothing specifically focused or driven by things that I have set aside. Learning takes many different forms, and I want to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge as well that when a lot of information is received, there's often a time to just step back and be able to assimilate the information, to be able to kind of digest. So there's actually something quite natural and fitting to taking a week back after having a more intense week of study. All right, now I'm going to take you day by day through the week and just let you know what each day looked like in the materials we used and how we spent our time learning about birds. At this point in our daily schedule is also the day when we are most likely to get to the library. So because I needed to go to the library and actually pick up our resources, we didn't actually do anything on birds for Monday. We had a math lesson and we did read aloud, but we didn't do anything specific on the unit study. But we did go and pick up the books, and the kids did start browsing them in the evening. The next day, I pulled out 3 that I wanted to use to introduce the subject matter. Spot the bird on the building site. The idea is that you try to spot the bird, which is a pigeon in this case, on every page. Now, I thought it was such a neat idea to be spotting a bird on a construction site because firstly, I have 2 boys, and my oldest, who is the one really looking at this book right now, is into tractors and construction and all that. So he was able to dive right in, just that initiated the subject right away. My daughter as well was completely engaged. She loves spotting things just in general, and she also enjoys tractors, I think, a lot because of her older brother's influence. But then my youngest, who is my other son, he also was engaged in this book as well, even though he's only 1.5. He came and sat with us, and he specifically liked to spot the motorcycles. So we would look on each page, in addition to spotting the bird and the things that were given as, can you spot these things, we would always look and try to spot if there were any motorcycles on the page. From there, we went to bird count. Now, I told the kids the 3 books that I was interested in reading in that day, and they chose the order of them. So they picked out bird count next. This book introduced well the topic of birding. It drew me in as an adult. It made it interesting and fun, and we were kind of spotting the birds along with the birdwatching team here. And it has the list of the birds that they're finding on each page. The little girl here, is the one adding to the list. And then the last one that we ended off with is Mama Built a Little Nest. This goes through a bunch of different birds and all of the different nests situations that different kinds of birds make. Really fascinating. Simple little poems almost about each nest, and we just kind of like marveled at each different nest. We took time to look and see how the nest was different. So that was our morning setup for introducing birds. Later on in the day, we actually had a little meetup with the Read-Aloud Revival author of the picture book for the month, Lita Judge. She authored the book Red Sled, which is the picture book that Sarah Mackenzie, the founder of Read-Aloud Revival, chose for the month of January. So we popped on to that call, and we were delightfully surprised to hear her talk a little bit about her childhood experiences in wildlife. She grew up in Alaska, and so she had a lot of experience with animals and birds, and she actually knew an owl that hatched, and she took care of that owl as a chick, and I think kept it as an adult. She showed a picture of her with the owl. So that was really neat to have that unexpected tie-in. I knew from Sarah Mackenzie that Lita had written a couple other books, and so I had ordered one of her books called Hoot and Peep. So after we had been on the call, I had this book on hand and I pulled it right out and we read it together, which tied in so well with our bird study, but also our time with Read-Aloud Revival. And this was a fun story about a sibling relationship and how we can grow to appreciate one another's differences. We certainly appreciated the illustrations so much more after hearing from the author illustrator, hearing about her inspiration and all that goes into making a picture book. That meeting of Lita Judge was in the afternoon. So that night, Tuesday night, we gathered up some books and sat down on the couch, and some of the books gathered by choice of the children were from the stack of library books on birds. And so we read 2 more books that evening. We read A Nest Full of Eggs. This book really illustrates well in story form how chicks hatch and how they are sustained by their mom and dad. We enjoyed this book, especially after the book that we read this morning about how different birds make different nests, and then to focus specifically on the robin building her nest and tending her young was a neat picture. A bird is a bird. And talking about the distinctions that birds have, what makes them birds. A bird is a bird because they have the beak, and all the things that they use beaks for. They have wings, and all the reasons why wings are important for bird life. And then it has this wonderful little page at the end here. It says, but wait, a platypus has a beak, a fly has wings, and a snake starts out in an egg, because that was the other topic that was discussed, is that birds hatch out of eggs. But are these birds? What is the one characteristic that is solely for birds? And feathers. Feathers are the one solely distinctive feature of birds. So, a bird is a bird. Great book. Tuesday ended up being a really heavy book day, and not even that I had planned to do that way. I had wanted to do those 3 books in the morning and to do the interview with Lita Judge, but I didn't realize how Lita Judge's interview would tie in with our bird theme, and I didn't realize that we would have a time after dinner to read books and that my kids would even want to continue learning about birds. So moving on to Wednesday morning, I had some info about beaks and feet. And these 2 pages of information are actually from a larger book of information that is available on the Good and Beautiful website. I will post that down in the description and all the details surrounding that. The book was chock full of information, places to write things that you're learning about birds, places to draw birds, and all sorts of prompts as far as writing about birds or reflecting on the birds that you've seen, or for investigating birds, researching. So I would highly recommend this PDF. The book is actually meant for higher ages than my children, so I just looked through the book and I looked for what would work for my children. Those 2 pages in particular I knew would hold their attention, that would be able to develop a conversation around beaks and around feet. And yes, indeed, it was really interesting to see all the different ways that birds' feet are made to be in all the different species of birds, and the same for the beaks. Beaks are so varied and different depending on what the bird eats, how it uses its beak to live and build its nest, and all of those kinds of things. So really, really interesting stuff that we were able to dive into and benefit from. For our additional activity on Wednesday, they each had pinpointed a bird without my prompting that they thought was special. So for my son, it was swiftlets. Swiftlets are known for the nests that they make out of their spit. So he was really drawn to that concept, that idea, and my daughter was really drawn to flamingos, specifically because they're pink. I decided that we were going to look up a couple videos about swiftlets and a couple on flamingos and kind of dive a little deeper, see these birds in action, and learn more about their habitat or how they live. I will see if I can link some of those videos down below as far as what we watched on flamingos and swiftlets. On Thursday, we sat around the kitchen table after Read Aloud, and the first thing we did was I asked them a couple questions about their birds of interest. I used a format also from the birding book by the Good and the Beautiful, Bird of Interest Study. So I did use some of the questions that they had, but I formatted them a little bit more for my kids and their levels, and I just wrote down things in the box. And I think that was kind of cool because they liked watching me write out their answers, and now they have this reference page. This is my son's. Of course, it got a little damaged here, but you know, that happens. This was my attempt at drawing a swiftlet, and he colored it all in because we talked about swiftlets for him. I asked my daughter about flamingos. I asked what she wanted to remember about flamingos from the videos that we had watched, and we talked a bit about why they're interesting to her to begin with. The color pink definitely came up, and my daughter actually cut up her page because she wanted to cut out the flamingo, and then she asked me to draw another flamingo. In the same sitting, while we reflected on our birds of interest, I pulled out our God's Big World pamphlet for the week, and we looked it over. Here was the theme here about this teen that lives in South America, and he made a bird guide. And so that was a wonderful addition to our bird study, which this was the original inspiration for the bird study. So it was really great to be able to tie that in. And of course, we did the activity page on the back. This is always looked forward to by my kids. They always are interested in God's big world. And then later on in the afternoon, again, we had some extra time that could be filled. And so I pulled out this one. This is called I Dreamed of Flying Like a Bird, My Adventures Photographing Wild Animals from a Helicopter. Now, this is actually a book that's a library discard, and I had this on our shelf upstairs. I had not originally thought of this book, including this book in our bird study, but when I saw it, I was browsing our bookshelves up here, and I'm like, oh, well, this would kind of give us a bird's eye view, and lo and behold, there's actually birds in it. This is a flock of flamingos, which of course we had already talked about, and just seemed a perfect tie-in to our videos that we had watched. Other animals like giraffes, zebras. This last picture was pretty neat though in light of all we were studying. The last book that we looked at on Thursday was The Big Bird Spot, a globe-trotting bird spotting adventure. This is written by a real-life birder, and this is the book that I purchased. I was not able to order it from any of our local libraries. So this gives a great feel for at-home birding, indoor birding, I guess you could call it, being able to spot birds. So each page gives you a specific bird that you want to spot. So like this one is up in the corner on the farm, the lapwing. And so you try to spot as many as it says 16 on this page. So we would spot a couple and then move on to the next page. I highly recommend this book. On Friday, we ended off our bird studies by looking at our state bird and our national bird. So we live in the U.S., so our national bird is the eagle, and we live in Massachusetts. So our state bird is the black-capped chickadee. So I pulled out this book, What It's Like to Be a Bird, which is a very informative, well put together book. Great illustrations, my goodness, like they are really, really vibrant and beautiful. So I had selected 2 pages that we would be looking at as far as the state and national birds go. So here's the eagle page, and we looked at that together, and I didn't read the whole thing. We just discussed certain parts of it, things that we had even discussed before, like the type of beak the eagle has is a specific type of beak that we had looked at on the beak page a couple days ago. We did talk about the eagle's vision, and just generally discussed what eagles do as far as birds of prey. And then we looked at the chickadee page here, and this is a black-capped chickadee here on the side. And so we talked a bit about what they eat and how we might see one around in our area as well, which led us to the activity that I had not specifically planned for, but we picked out from the recycling bin one of our discarded juice canisters, and we made a bird feeder from that juice canister. We cut open a little hole, and we poured some bird seed in there, and we hung it outside to see if we could attract any black-capped chickadees to our feeder. None at the point of filming this video.
Although we did.
Yeah. So we haven't seen any black-capped chickadees at the bird feeder as of yet.
We did find footprints.
Bird footprints, right? Where did we find those bird footprints?
Oh, close to the bird.
They were close to the bird feeder. There were bird footprints all around where the bird feeder was.
I think they must have been chickadees.
They might have been chickadees. We didn't know what kind of bird they might be, but we did notice that there was some investigation around the bird feeder from some type of bird. In addition to the pages that we looked at about the eagle and the black-capped chickadee, I also searched on YouTube for eagle videos and black-capped chickadee videos, and we found a couple that really were interesting. We watched a chickadee and her mate nesting, and then sitting with their eggs, and them hatching and them growing and then eventually being able to fly out, which was a really neat video. I'll link it down below. Oh yeah, sticking his head in, huh?
Yes. I think that's the moon. So I think the
And we also watched a couple videos on eagles, which were so fascinating. I mean, the kids are still asking to watch videos about eagles, even this week, the week after. So I'm taking this recording on the Wednesday after our bird week, and this is the week that I talked about where we haven't done a ton of organized school. It's been laid back and more relaxed, but we have continued on in the Burgess bird book for children. I didn't know if this would catch on, but we have read, let's see, how many chapters? We're on chapter 9 right now. So we've been enjoying this to some degree or another. The kids at this point are asking for another chapter each time I finish. So we read this in the mornings for our read aloud, and we'll just see how farther we get. It is a kind of a story version about birds, exploring birds. So the main character is a rabbit named Peter Rabbit. I don't know if it's any connection to the Peter Rabbit by Potter, but basically all of his friends are birds, and he introduces us to each one of them as he goes around visiting with them, and so it's captured our interest for the moment, and we'll see how far we get with that. And then the other thing that I have pursued from an adult standpoint, this is called Birding Without Borders, and it's written by Noah Strycker, who actually holds the world record for the number of birds that he's seen in 1 year. So this is a story about that 1 year worldwide quest, and I'm really enjoying it. He writes well, and the story is fascinating. The characters that he meets and the birds that he sees. There's a little map. It's called Noah's Ark. Just as clever. Anyway, so I read that in the evening when I put the kids to bed, and I sit with them for a little bit as they drop off to sleep, and that's my chance for reading my own books, and so this is the book I've been reading every night. I'll read usually a chapter or two as they're falling asleep. So that brings me to the end of this video on all that we've learned about birds. Please do check back. If you enjoyed this resource and you found it helpful or interesting to you, please check back to my channel. I've got many other videos out at this point, and much more to come, hopefully. I'm already putting together our unit study for next week as well, and we'll just see where we go from here. My little one is enjoying the rocking chair right now. That's where all the noise is coming from right at the moment. Well, thanks for joining me.